I was not supposed to hear them. That's what my daughter-in-law, Stephanie, told my son in the hallway. Keep your voice down. She drifts in and out. Sign the papers while she's foggy. It'll be cleaner. I lay there with my eyes closed, listening to my own life being negotiated like a used sofa. Power of attorney. Memory assessment. Temporary placement at Willow Creek Residential, just for a few weeks while we stabilize her medications. I'm 71, not senile. My knees ache when the weather turns, and I forget where I put my glasses, but I remember everything that matters, especially the sound of people planning to disappear you while you're still breathing. They thought I'd broken after my husband, Walter, passed. I did break for a while. 37 years married and then silence at the dinner table where his laugh used to sit. Grief makes you slow, and people mistake slow for stupid. Stephanie smelled opportunity. She began managing things, doctor's appointments, bank cards, for convenience, a nice woman from church who helps older girls downsize. Downsizing meant she had me sorting photo albums while strangers put pink stickers on my furniture. The placement evaluation happened 2 days later. A woman with a tight bun and tighter smile asked me to draw a clock and name 5 animals. I named 6 and drew the clock perfectly, then drew a second one showing the time I met my husband in 1979 at a county fair. She did not smile. She checked boxes. My son looked at the floor and squeezed his wedding ring. When the evaluator left, Stephanie whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. Willow Creek is 5 stars. They have bingo." I played my part. I asked questions like a tired child, and let my hands tremble just long enough to make them comfortable. When they took me to Willow Creek for a tour, I noticed everything. The smell of bleach trying to hide something sweeter and rotting. A woman in a pink cardigan calling for her sister down an empty hall. The administrator, a husky man with a salesman's handshake, said phrases like robust activity calendar and industry-leading occupancy. He asked if I had long-term care insurance and if my house was paid off. I smiled and asked for tea. He gave me a brochure with photos of grey-haired models playing checkers on a lawn I never saw in real life. On the last page, near the fine print, was a logo for Northfield Care Partners, LLC. That night, Stephanie slipped papers onto my lap while the TV played. Initial here, Mary Ann here. It's just to authorize your temporary stay and medication management. We'll handle everything. It's a lot for you. She patted my hand like I was an old cat. I put on my glasses, smiled sweetly and said, "Of course, dear, but I'll need my pen." The one Walter gave me. I stood, slow as molasses, and shuffled into my bedroom. I closed the door, locked it, and dialed a number I hadn't called since Walter's funeral. Our attorney, Mr. Harris, the man who wrote our wills and taught Walter to hide surprises where even family wouldn't go digging. "Mary," he said without hello, "I've been wondering when you'd call." "Tonight," I said. "They tried to put me in a home." He didn't gasp or scold or comfort. He just said, "Come in at 9, and wear something you can breathe in. We're going to war." At 9 the next morning, I told Stephanie I needed fresh air and a walk around the block. She was on the phone talking about estate taxes. I put on Walter's grey cardigan and walked right past the hydrangeas and kept walking to the bus stop. It felt like my first escape at 17 when I ran off to marry a steelworker in boots and a grin. At Harrison Low, the receptionist held my hand like I was someone who mattered. In a glass room, Mr. Harris spread out papers like a magician revealing cards. "Your husband was meticulous," he said. "You own your home outright. The deed transferred to the Mary A. Whitlock Living Trust upon his death. No one touches it without you. The accounts your daughter-in-law moved into her management are still under your trust's umbrella. We can recover everything. But that's not all." He slid me a page I'd never seen. Something Walter had signed 18 months before he died. A private memorandum filed with a separate firm. He put aside a quiet fund. He called it your walk-away money. More than enough to live well, buy something special, or settle a score. I stared at the number and felt both loved and furious. He prepared for the day our child and his wife would turn me into an asset to be placed. It broke my heart to admit that he'd been right. "Can I buy a nursing home?" I asked, surprising even myself with the steadiness of my voice. Mr. Harris blinked. "With partners easily." "Why?" I told him about Willow Creek, about the logo, Northfield Care Partners, LLC. He nodded and called a friend named Yvonne, an investor with a mind like a chessboard. By noon, the three of us were on a conference call, poring over Northfield's debt ratios, occupancy rates, and the administrator's reputation. He had 2 quiet lawsuits for understaffing, and a third pending for trying to evict a late payer without proper notice. The company was leveraged to the hilt and looking to offload underperforming properties. Willow Creek was on the list. My son stared at me as if I'd performed a magic trick using the moon. "Mom," he whispered. "What did you do?" "I kept living," I said. "And while I was at it, I built something that won't throw old people away." Stephanie's face worked through denial, anger, then something like fear. "You can't just block us from helping," she said. "We were doing what's best. You get confused. You were leaving the stove on." "What do you want out of this, Mary?" Yvonne asked. Her voice was warm but surgical. "I want my dignity," I said. "And I want them to learn the difference between love and convenience." "Done," she said. "We'll set up a new entity, Whitluck Health Holdings. You'll be majority. We'll take Willow Creek off their hands, discreetly." For 3 weeks I played fragile. I let Stephanie take my car keys for safety and let her move my nightstand to make space. Meanwhile, I took early morning rides with Mr. Harris to sign documents, read reports, and meet a woman named Esm who had run a truly kind long-term care facility for 20 years before retiring. She agreed to be my eyes. We walked Willow Creek together, pretending to be a cousin and her friend, and Esm whispered, "See that? That's where they hide the call light response times. Those numbers are fake." She made notes. We drafted a plan. Northfield sold us Willow Creek on a Wednesday morning. By Wednesday evening, I was standing in my living room, holding a letter with a gold seal that said, "Notice of Ownership Transfer." I ran my fingers over the raised letters and let the weight of it sink through my bones. I had bought the place they wanted to stash me, the way you buy a wolf's den and domesticate the animal. We waited a week before we moved. The timing mattered. Stephanie and my son had set a date for my temporary placement. They'd booked a small moving truck for a Saturday morning. "Just a few weeks until you feel steady," my son murmured. He looked like the little boy who used to build Lego towers by my feet. I wanted to hold his face and ask him where I lost him, but I said nothing. I climbed into the passenger seat while Stephanie directed the driver. I carried Walter's cardigan like a flag. At Willow Creek, the administrator waited with that salesman grin. "Mrs. Whitluck, welcome back. We've prepared a lovely suite. Sunlight in the mornings, perfect for your roses." He ushered us into a conference room to finalize paperwork. Stephanie shuffled pages with dazzling confidence, the way people do when they've forgotten how to feel doubt. My son's pen hovered. Before he could sign, the administrator's desk phone rang. He frowned, listened, then stood so fast his chair screeched. "Excuse me a moment," he said, and stepped into the hall. Voices rose. Papers rustled. Someone said, "What do you mean ownership change?" Another voice, "Effective last Wednesday. It's right here." The administrator re-entered, pale where he was usually pink. "I'm very sorry," he said. "Not sorry at all. There appears to be a clerical delay. We'll need to reconvene in an hour." "Perfect," I said. "I'll have tea." Stephanie hissed, "Don't start, Mary." I smiled like an angel who has read the ending. At 1 o'clock, the conference room door opened. In walked Mr. Harris, Yvonne, and Esm. The administrator started to bluster. But Yvonne placed a document on the table with the grace of a queen. As of last Wednesday, she said, Willow Creek is owned by Whitlock Health Holdings. I'm the managing partner. This is Mrs. Whitlock, majority owner. She looked at my son. You must be James. Stephanie laughed the way people do before they know they're finished. This is ridiculous, she said. You can't just buy. I can, I said. I did. The administrator squinted at me as if I'd grown a second head. Mr. Harris handed him an envelope. Your employment is terminated for cause, he said. Details in the letter. Your replacement begins Monday. The administrator opened his mouth, then closed it. He left with a box of his desk plants before anyone could clap. My son stared at me as if I performed a magic trick using the moon. Mom, he whispered. What did you do? I kept living, I said. And while I was at it, I built something that won't throw old people away. Stephanie's face worked through denial, anger, then something like fear. You can't just block us from helping, she said. We were doing what's best. You get confused. You were leaving the stove on. Once I said, when the neighbor's cat darted in and I ran after it, you used my grief to redraw our family as an org chart with you at the top. That ends here. Yvonne slid a new stack of papers across the table. Here are the guest policies and payment terms, she said to Stephanie brightly. Effective immediately, no one signs on behalf of a resident without a court order. And this resident, she nodded at me, isn't a resident. She's the owner. The staff gathered in the hallway, whispering. Esme stepped forward. Everyone, she said, voice steady as a church bell, there's new leadership. We'll be hiring night aides, restoring call light response times to under 3 minutes, and reinstating family visiting hours that actually serve residents. No more activities that are just bingo and a TV. We'll bring back choir, gardening, and book club. This isn't a storage unit for people whose families are impatient. It's a home, and it will be treated like one. I looked at the woman in the pink cardigan from my first tour. She was sunning herself near a window, eyes closed. When she opened them and saw me, she smiled as if we'd shared a joke. Maybe we had. The story didn't end with applause. Stories like this never do. They end with long, ordinary days where you keep choosing your spine over your fear. I told my son we would talk, but that for now, his wife would not be managing my money, my keys, or my life. Mr. Harris reclaimed the accounts under my trust and reported the downsized lady to the state for unlicensed estate brokering. Yvonne renegotiated our supply contracts and hired a nursing director who walks the floors at night. Esme took me to a staff potluck where they teased me for bringing grocery store cookies. I brought my roses from home and planted them outside the dining room. There were consequences. Stephanie called me names over the phone I hadn't heard since high school. She told James I'd stolen his inheritance. I told James I'd already given him everything worth inheriting. A name untarnished, and a lesson he'd either learn now, embarrassed, or later, when it was too late. He stood on my porch for a long time one evening, turning his hat in his hands before he said, I forgot you taught me to ride a bike by letting go. I touched his cheek the way I wanted to months earlier. I never stopped letting you try, I told him. I stopped letting you try on me. 3 months into owning Willow Creek, we held a family night. Real one. Not the kind where people drop off store cupcakes and vanish in 20 minutes. We put long tables on the back lawn, where the brochure had promised checkers. I hired a local high school quartet and set up an open mic. A 92-year-old man recited a poem he wrote in 1948. The woman in the pink cardigan played Moon River on the piano, and her sister, who turned out to be very real, sang softly by her side. I made iced tea so sweet it would make a dentist faint, and I told anyone who asked that I wasn't a saint. I was stubborn. Sometimes that's the holiest thing a woman can be. Near the end of the night, Stephanie came, hovering at the edge like a stray cat that can't decide if your porch is safe. She had no makeup on. The performance look was gone. Mary, she said quietly when I walked over. I went too far. Yes, I said. You did. I thought I was helping, she said. And her voice wobbled on the word thought. I was scared. After Walter died, it felt like everything was falling. Money. The house. James. I grabbed the steering wheel because I didn't know what else to do. Fear does ugly things. I nodded toward the tables where residents and staff were eating pie and arguing about the best Aretha Franklin song. You were steering us into a ditch, I said. But you can still help now, if you can tell the difference between control and care. She looked at the roses lining the dining room window. I can try, she said. Good, I said. Start by apologizing to me, and then ask Ezen where we keep the bingo prizes. You're on prize duty tonight. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning, a condition, a boundary wide enough to walk but too narrow to run over me again. I had thought owning a nursing home would be about winning a fight. It turned out to be about writing a new story for what happens to us when we live long enough to be inconvenient. We hired a music therapist and a barber who knows how to listen. We turned the fluorescent lights down and put twinkle lights in the hallways.